Welcome to 1001 Curious Mysteries. Tonight, before the lights fade and the world grows quiet, let me ask you a simple question. How well do we really know Christmas? For most of us, Christmas is painted in familiar colors, warm lights glowing in winter windows, gentle music drifting through cold streets, laughter wrapped in the promise of peace and goodwill. It is a season we are taught to associate with kindness, generosity, and comfort. But what if this story is only part of the truth? Beneath the cheerful surface of Christmas lies a much older, more complex history, one shaped by forgotten beliefs, uneasy traditions, and stories that time has carefully softened. Long before Christmas became a celebration of joy and family, it was connected to the deepest fears and hopes of humanity, the darkness of winter, the uncertainty of survival, and the struggle to find meaning when the sun seemed to disappear from the sky. In this episode, we begin our journey by exploring the hidden side of Christmas, a side rarely mentioned, rarely remembered, and almost never discussed. This is not a story meant to disturb, but to awaken curiosity. Because history is never as simple as it appears, and traditions are often built upon layers of forgotten meaning. Across centuries and cultures, Christmas absorbed older winter festivals, mysterious rituals, and symbolic figures whose original purposes have slowly faded. Some were meant to protect communities from fear. Others served as reminders of consequences, balance, and renewal. Over time, these elements were reshaped, rebranded, or quietly erased to fit a gentler narrative. What remains today is a polished version of Christmas, a carefully curated celebration that hides its rough edges. Yet those edges still exist, waiting beneath the surface for anyone willing to look closer. Tonight, we are not here to take away the magic of Christmas, but to understand where that magic came from. Because mystery does not destroy wonder, it deepens it. When we uncover the forgotten stories behind familiar traditions, Christmas becomes more than a holiday. It becomes a living memory of humanity's attempt to bring light into the darkest days of the year. So settle in, lower the volume of the outside world, and let curiosity guide you. This is the first step into the dark, forgotten, and fascinating side of Christmas, a journey through history, mystery, and the stories hidden in plain sight. And this is tonight's curious mystery. Christmas tree sparkles. What makes this story truly special is not just the subject of Christmas itself, but the way it aligns perfectly with the spirit of 1001 Curious Mysteries. This channel is built for moments like this, when familiar ideas are gently turned upside down, inviting us to question what we think we already know. At its core, 1001 Curious Mysteries is not about fear or shock. It is about curiosity. It asks viewers to pause, slow down, and look beneath the surface of everyday traditions. Christmas, perhaps more than any other holiday, is surrounded by assumptions. We grow up accepting its symbols without asking where they came from or why they exist. That makes it the ideal subject for a curious mind. This mystery-driven approach allows us to explore Christmas in a calm, thoughtful way. Instead of focusing on extreme stories or dramatic events, we examine subtle questions. Why did certain traditions survive while others disappeared? How did ancient beliefs slowly transform into modern customs? And what parts of the story were quietly left behind as society changed? The format of this channel also encourages reflection rather than judgment. Viewers are not told what to believe. They are invited to listen, imagine, and connect the pieces on their own. This makes the content feel personal, almost like a shared late-night conversation rather than a lecture. By framing Christmas as a mystery rather than a celebration or a debate, the story becomes timeless. It speaks to history lovers, folklore enthusiasts, and anyone who enjoys uncovering hidden meanings in everyday life. Each episode can stand alone, yet together they form a larger narrative, one that slowly reveals how tradition, memory, and human emotion are deeply intertwined. In this way, Christmas becomes more than a holiday episode. It becomes a gateway into understanding how cultures preserve comfort while quietly reshaping the past. And that sense of discovery, gentle, thoughtful, and endlessly curious, is exactly what defines 1001 Curious Mysteries. One of the most compelling reasons this story draws us in is the powerful contrast at its heart. Christmas is universally framed as a season of light, warmth, and reassurance. Streets glow with decorations, homes feel softer, and even time itself seems to slow down. Against the cold and darkness of winter, Christmas promises comfort. And it is precisely this promise that makes its hidden layers so intriguing. Contrast has always been a powerful storytelling tool. When everything appears gentle and familiar, the smallest unanswered question becomes impossible to ignore. Why does this tradition exist? Why does this symbol feel older than its explanation? Why do certain stories feel incomplete, as if something has been carefully removed? Historically, Christmas sits at a symbolic crossroads. It arrives during the darkest period of the year, when daylight is scarce and nature feels distant. For ancient societies, this time was not merely festive, it was uncertain. Survival depended on hope, ritual, and meaning. Light was not decoration. It was reassurance. Celebration was not indulgence, it was resilience. Over time, as societies grew safer and more structured, the sharper edges of these traditions softened. Fear gave way to comfort. Symbols of warning turned into symbols of joy. What once carried layered meanings slowly became decorative, while their origins faded into the background. This creates a fascinating imbalance between what we see and what once was. The surface of Christmas feels calm and predictable, yet beneath it lies a foundation built during a far more fragile time in human history. That tension, the gap between appearance and origin, is where mystery lives. For a curious storyteller, this contrast is invaluable. It allows us to explore serious ideas without heaviness, and history without confrontation. The story unfolds quietly, revealing that even the most comforting traditions were shaped by uncertainty, adaptation, and imagination. By recognizing this contrast, we begin to understand that Christmas did not lose its meaning as it changed, it transformed. The light we celebrate today exists because darkness once demanded it. And when we acknowledge both sides, the holiday becomes richer, deeper, and far more human. This balance between comfort and curiosity is what keeps us listening. Because sometimes, the most familiar moments hold the greatest mysteries, hidden not in shadows, but in plain sight. At the heart of every mystery lies a simple spark, a question that was never fully answered. This is where the story of Christmas becomes especially intriguing. For generations, traditions were passed down smoothly, wrapped in repetition and routine. Over time, questions faded, not because answers were found, but because curiosity slowly fell asleep. Why do certain customs feel older than the explanations we give them? Why do some symbols appear across cultures that never directly met? And why were certain traditions quietly simplified or abandoned altogether? These are not questions meant to challenge belief, but to invite wonder. Curiosity does not demand conflict. It asks for attention. When we revisit Christmas with fresh eyes, we begin to notice details that once blended into the background: rituals performed without explanation, stories told without endings, symbols repeated without context. Each one hints at a deeper narrative waiting to be rediscovered. In earlier centuries, storytelling was not only entertainment, it was preservation. Traditions carried lessons about time, nature, and community. As societies evolved, many of these lessons were no longer needed in their original form. Some were reshaped to fit new values. Others were left behind, remembered only in fragments. What makes this exploration meaningful is its gentleness. We are not uncovering secrets to shock or provoke, but to understand. By asking forgotten questions, we restore depth to something familiar. We allow history to speak in its own quiet voice, rather than forcing it into modern expectations. For viewers of 1001 Curious Mysteries, this approach creates a safe space for reflection. There is no pressure to agree or disagree, only to listen and consider. Curiosity becomes a bridge between past and present, linking modern comfort with ancient uncertainty. And perhaps that is the true power of mystery. Not to unsettle us, but to remind us that even the most ordinary traditions were once extraordinary solutions to real human fears and hopes. As we continue this journey, every unanswered question becomes an invitation not to doubt Christmas, but to see it more clearly than ever before. One of the defining elements of this journey is the tone in which the story is told. Mystery does not always need intensity or urgency. In fact, some of the most memorable stories are delivered slowly, in a calm and measured voice, allowing ideas to settle naturally. This approach is especially important when exploring a subject as familiar and emotionally rooted as Christmas. A gentle, atmospheric tone invites listeners to relax rather than brace themselves. It turns the experience into quiet companionship, something to listen to late at night, during a slow evening, or while the world outside grows still. Instead of demanding attention, the story earns it through patience and subtlety. This style mirrors the nature of memory itself. History rarely arrives in sharp edges. It unfolds gradually, often through small details that feel insignificant at first. A softened tone allows space for imagination, encouraging listeners to visualize winter landscapes, candlelight, and ancient gatherings without being overwhelmed. For 1001 Curious Mysteries, this rhythm is essential. The channel thrives not on fast reveals, but on gentle accumulation. Each idea builds upon the last, creating a sense of continuity rather than climax. The mystery deepens not because of dramatic twists, but because understanding slowly expands. This calm delivery also respects the emotional connection many people have with Christmas. Instead of challenging or disrupting those feelings, it moves alongside them. Viewers are not asked to abandon nostalgia, but to enrich it with context and depth. By slowing down, the story becomes more inclusive. It welcomes casual listeners, history lovers, and those simply seeking a moment of quiet reflection. Mystery, in this form, becomes comforting rather than unsettling. As the narrative continues, the atmosphere itself becomes part of the story, a reminder that curiosity does not need noise. Sometimes, the most powerful discoveries happen when we speak softly, listen closely, and allow the past to unfold at its own pace. One of the strongest aspects of this topic is its ability to grow. The mystery of Christmas is not a single story with a clear beginning and end. It is a collection of threads, each leading in a different direction. This makes it ideal for a multi-episode series that unfolds gradually, inviting viewers to return again and again. Each episode can focus on one specific layer of the tradition. One night, the story may explore forgotten winter festivals. Another, it may examine symbolic figures, seasonal customs, or historical moments that quietly shaped how Christmas is celebrated today. Every episode stands on its own, yet together they form a larger picture. This structure encourages slow discovery rather than rushed explanation. Viewers are not overwhelmed with information all at once. Instead, curiosity is rewarded over time, creating a sense of continuity and familiarity. The series becomes a ritual of its own, something expected, anticipated, and revisited. For 1001 Curious Mysteries, this format strengthens the bond between the channel and its audience. Returning listeners already understand the tone and pace. They know what kind of experience awaits them: thoughtful, calm, and quietly engaging. That trust allows deeper stories to be told. A series also allows flexibility. Episodes can vary in length, focus, and depth without breaking the overall theme. Some stories may lean more toward folklore, others toward history or symbolism. This variety keeps the content fresh while maintaining a consistent identity. Over time, the collection of episodes becomes more than individual narratives. It becomes an archive, a gentle exploration of how one holiday reflects centuries of human thought, adaptation, and memory. In this way, the mystery of Christmas is never truly solved. It simply unfolds, one story at a time, inviting listeners to stay curious, stay reflective, and continue the journey whenever they are ready. Long before Christmas became a familiar celebration, winter itself was a powerful force that shaped human behavior. Short days and long nights carried uncertainty, and people searched for ways to bring meaning and reassurance to the darkest part of the year. This is where many ancient rituals and seasonal beliefs quietly entered the story. Across different regions, communities created traditions centered on protection, renewal, and balance. Fire, light, food, and shared gatherings were not simply symbolic, they were practical responses to fear and isolation. These rituals helped people feel connected, both to one another and to the natural rhythms they depended on. As centuries passed, many of these practices were absorbed into newer traditions. Their original meanings softened, and their forms changed. What once served as a protective or symbolic act slowly became a custom, repeated without explanation. Yet traces of those early beliefs still remain, woven into modern celebrations. Exploring these ancient rituals does not mean returning to a distant past, but recognizing continuity. It reveals how human instincts seeking comfort, marking time, and finding light in darkness have remained remarkably consistent. Only the language and symbols have evolved. For viewers, this exploration adds depth without heaviness. It transforms simple actions into echoes of history. A familiar seasonal gesture suddenly carries centuries of quiet intention behind it. This approach also reinforces the idea that Christmas did not appear fully formed. It emerged gradually, shaped by adaptation rather than replacement. Old beliefs were not erased. They were reinterpreted. By understanding these ancient layers, the holiday feels less like a fixed tradition and more like a living story, one shaped by countless generations facing the same winter sky, searching for warmth, meaning, and reassurance in the longest nights of the year. As traditions evolved, stories became one of the most powerful ways to preserve meaning. Mythical figures and symbolic characters emerged not as entertainment, but as tools for understanding the world. Over time, many of these figures became softened, simplified, or quietly forgotten, yet their influence still lingers within Christmas traditions today. Originally, symbolic figures often represented balance. They reminded communities of responsibility, consequence, and renewal. Some embodied generosity and protection, while others served as cautionary symbols, gentle guides rather than sources of fear. Their purpose was to help people navigate difficult seasons, both physically and emotionally. As societies changed, these characters were reshaped to fit new values. Complex symbolism gave way to clearer, more comforting narratives. What remained was familiarity, while deeper meanings faded into the background. Names changed, appearances softened, and roles were simplified, but the foundation stayed the same. Exploring these figures allows us to see how storytelling adapts to cultural needs. Stories are never static. They move, shift, and respond to the concerns of each generation. What matters is not what was lost, but what was preserved in new forms. For a curious audience, this layer of Christmas is especially compelling. It reveals how imagination and tradition work together to create continuity. Myth becomes memory, and memory becomes ritual. By revisiting these symbolic stories with curiosity rather than judgment, we rediscover their original purpose, not to unsettle, but to guide, teach, and comfort. They remind us that behind every familiar figure lies a long human effort to explain the world, pass on values, and find meaning during the quietest time of the year. Beyond symbols and rituals, Christmas is also shaped by real moments in history, events that unfolded quietly, without celebration or ceremony. These moments rarely appear in traditional holiday narratives, yet they played a role in shaping how the season is remembered and understood. History does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it leaves behind subtle traces, a custom adjusted, a story retold differently, a tradition paused and later restored. Political shifts, social changes, and cultural reforms all influenced how Christmas was practiced, even when those influences were never openly discussed. Folklore often steps in where written history falls silent. Stories passed down through generations preserved emotions rather than facts, how people felt during certain winters, what they feared losing, and what they hoped would return. These quiet stories carry truth in a different form, offering insight into everyday life rather than grand events. Exploring these layers allows us to see Christmas as a reflection of society itself. The holiday adapted to survive changing times, absorbing new meanings while letting others fade. What we celebrate today is not a single tradition, but a collection of choices made across centuries. For the listener, this perspective adds richness. Christmas becomes more than a date on the calendar, it becomes a mirror of human resilience and adaptation. Each tradition carries echoes of decisions made long ago, shaped by circumstance rather than intention. By gently uncovering these historical and folkloric threads, we learn that the mystery of Christmas is not hidden in dramatic moments, but in the quiet spaces between them where memory, necessity, and imagination quietly shaped a season meant to endure. As our journey comes full circle, the mystery of Christmas reveals its final and most important lesson: understanding deepens wonder. When we explore the hidden layers of a familiar tradition, we do not lose its warmth, we gain a richer connection to it. By looking beyond the surface, Christmas transforms from a fixed celebration into a living story shaped by countless generations. Every ritual, symbol, and story carries traces of human hope, adaptation, and imagination. What once helped people endure uncertainty now offers comfort in a different way. This exploration is not about changing how we celebrate, but about seeing more clearly. Curiosity allows us to appreciate tradition without taking it for granted. It reminds us that familiarity does not mean simplicity, and comfort does not mean emptiness. For 1001 Curious Mysteries, this perspective defines the purpose of storytelling. Mystery is not something to solve and discard, it is something to sit with, reflect on, and carry forward. Each discovery adds depth, not distance. In the end, Christmas remains what it has always been, a moment carved out of winter, shaped by light, memory, and shared meaning. The stories hidden beneath it do not weaken its magic. They explain why that magic has lasted so long. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all, not what Christmas hides, but how it continues to adapt, endure, and quietly remind us that even in the darkest seasons, people have always found ways to create light. As we reach the end of tonight's journey, one thing becomes clear: Christmas is far more than a single story or a single meaning. It is a collection of memories, traditions, and quiet adaptations shaped by centuries of human experience. Beneath the familiar lights and rituals lies a deeper narrative, one built from curiosity, resilience, and the timeless search for comfort during the darkest days of the year. By exploring these hidden layers, we do not remove the warmth of Christmas. Instead, we discover why it has lasted. Every symbol, every tradition, and every story carries echoes of people who once stood where we stand now, looking toward winter and choosing light. This is the heart of 1001 Curious Mysteries, not to uncover answers that end a story, but to open doors that invite reflection. Mystery reminds us that the past is never truly silent, and that even the most familiar moments can still surprise us when we listen closely. Thank you for spending this quiet time with us. If tonight's story sparked your curiosity, we invite you to return for the next chapter, where another forgotten layer of history waits to be rediscovered. Until then, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and let wonder guide you through even the most familiar traditions. Good night, and see you in the next mystery. Crescent moon sparkles.